Alright, so today we're going to be talking about playing on a budget. You can get all of these decks we're going to be discussing today for under $100, and they are competitively viable. They've been topping in recent days, and I'm super hyped to present them to you. Of course, there's a myriad of decks out there that are still able to compete, so please, if you have any of your own ideas and suggestions, leave them in the comments down below for everybody trying to, you know, save a bit of money and play on a budget. If you enjoyed this video and other videos of the budget type on my channel, make sure to give it a like and also let me know down in the comments. So let's go ahead and get started. The first deck is going to be Flunder. Now, whether you like it or not, Flunder is going to be an insane choice right now. It's playing D-Shifter, which is extremely important because it beats all of the top decks pretty much. And just like we talk about every single time I mention Flunder, and let me pull up a list actually over here, it's just great at what it's doing. It's pretty much stunning your opponent, preventing them from playing with Harpy's Feather Storm, M-Pen, obviously Shifter like we talked about, and then it puts up interactions like Ryza Bounce and also Apex Avian, Negate and all of that, and it's not the most consistent deck, but it's still fine. It's playing a lot of starters, and another thing is that some people are straying away from Ashe specifically, you know, because of the fire decks. And yeah, they still cite it, you know, you can still play it against Flunder, but some other players are also playing completely like just going second power spell decks. Like Voiceless Voice is a great example of that, where you can make use of, you know, cards like Enemy Controller, etc. So it's better for Flunder, you know, it can kind of thrive in a format where there's not as many hand traps around. So there's that. It's also Flunder, normal summoning, does not trigger Princess, which is amazing. And another thing is that now you can play the, I forgot the name of the card and I figured I would remember it, but I didn't. So I think it's called Swallow's Cowrie, if I'm not mistaken. So it's the spell card, the 2-off that you see in this deck list, or, you know, different ratios in all of the deck lists that I'll be showcasing. But basically, it's just like the Advent Adventure, but for Winged Beast specifically, so it can dodge negation, which is so important for Flunder, because before you would have to play cards like Book of Moon, etc., so you could dodge stuff, and now you don't need to do that anymore because you can just play this card, which is a TCG exclusive, and it's actually really good for this deck, so this is nice. And let us check out the actual total cost of Flunder. It's $62, and I counted everything. Everything that you see in the deck list. Usually I just count cores, but when cores aren't that expensive, you know, I'll just count every single one of them. So in this calculation of about $60, you're also getting 3 Prosperity and like Zeus and some other cards. The only one that wasn't included is Access Code because, you know, it's Flunder. Like, you're not gonna go into Access Code that much. And if you already own it, of course, you can put it in your Flunder deck. There's, of course, the little issue of Thrust. I didn't include Thrust, obviously, in this calculation, and it's about $40 right now, so it's not the cheapest card. However, if you're spending about $60 for your deck, you still have about $40 to spend to get to your total of like $100, which is like a fair amount to spend for a competitively viable deck, at least in my opinion. So you can invest in like one Thrust maybe. You can invest into another one later down the line, because Flunder is one of those decks that are going to be able to be played for quite a long while. Like, let's just think about it. Flunder is probably not getting hit. I don't think that's a realistic thought. So, you know, you can wait for Thrust to go down in price with like a reprint, you know, on the horizon or something. But yeah, other than that, like, it's not terrible to spend, you know, for a staple, which you can use potentially in other decks. And you're still around the $100 to $150 mark for a deck if you want, and if you know you're going to be playing Flunder for like a while, if that makes sense. Because Thrust has amazing targets in this deck. And again, like, being in a format where power spells are fairly necessary, you know, Thrust just becomes better. And like I said, you have great targets, Harpy's Feather Storm, amazing. And let's just, again, pull up a deck list so we can actually go through the targets. So obviously you have evenly matched. This is like also really important for going second. And you can just get random cards, like literally terraforming if you have to get your plays going, you know, if your opponent activates something, obviously. So yeah, I don't think it's a bad deck. It's actually extremely strong in the next format. So yeah, you know, I would definitely look into getting Flunder if this is something that you feel like playing, and obviously it's cheap. So yes, let's move on to the next deck. I want to mention Pearly. It's a tiny bit more expensive. The total cost of Pearly is about $90, and this is without Prosperity. So a playset of Prosperity is going to cost you about $16. So in total, you would be spending about $105 for Pearly, which I think is still fine. And if you get Prosperity, you can literally put it in any deck. Like any deck almost. And what makes Pearly so great is the fact that pretty much you can play Shifter, which is really good. You have space for non-engine, which is also important. And just overall, Pearly is like, it's kind of tough to contend with if it goes off. Like, I get that it loses to some hand traps, which right now some people are playing quite a lot of them, but I still would call it one of the top choices, and the results speak for themselves. You can see Pearly consistently doing well. And like Noir, yeah, it's able to be outed, but it's gonna be quite tough and you go through a lot of your resources. And even if Pearly just ends on like, you know, hand traps and then perhaps a beauty or something, and you're not able to break the board, because this is the main issue. Like, what makes Pearly amazing is the follow-up. My Friend Pearly and Straight Pearly Street, they're just really good cards. And it's not the most consistent deck right now, with Delicious being at 1 and Sleepy being at 2, but still you should be fine with all the spells you're playing. The only issue is Crossout. And I call it an issue, obviously, because it's not the cheapest card out there, and it's fairly important in this deck. So this is one of the cards that actually the only card I didn't include in this calculation, because it's part of non-engine and you can include it if you want to, but I do think it's quite important. And this is a choice you have to make for yourself if you want to, you know, spend for Crossout or not. And of course, if you already own it, that's great. So yes, Crossout is the only little issue here, but other than that, you know, I think Pearly is fine. If you know how to play it well, you're going to be able to literally run circles around your opponent. They're not going to be able to, like, keep up with what you're doing, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think Pearly is a very decent choice, actually. Let's move on. The next deck I wanted to talk about is Yubel Unchained. Now, this one, like, it's interesting. I would not call it the greatest deck out there. You know, it does have inherent flaws, which would just be, you know, the power level, and it's fairly fragile. However, if it goes off and your opponent does not really know what's happening, because that's usually going to be the case, then you should be fine. You are literally, let me pull up a deck list before I continue. You're literally fusing away your opponent's just existence, pretty much. And you know, you play Tour Guide, obviously. There's Unchained plays, which you can go into, which I really, really like, because it's very similar to Labyrinth, where it's like, if your plays aren't exactly going through, and if you're not achieving what you want, or if you just want to add something on top of your existing board, then the Unchained cards come into play. And, you know, I like this energy, and I think it's really interesting. Again, it is a surprise factor, and you can play Super Polymerization together with your actual Super Polymerization type of effect that's used in your deck. So yeah, you know, also Shifter, a really important part, you know, of this deck and why it's able to perform. It's pretty much like not one of the top meta decks, more like if you want to counter the meta, you know, you can play Yubel, and also like it's Yubel. It's really cool. So let's check out the total cost if you feel like playing this. And if you maybe already own Unchained but don't feel like you want to play Unchained moving forward because it's not, you know, the strongest one, it's going to be about $107 for the entire like Yubel plus Unchained cards. And with Prosperity, it's going to be a little more, around 120. But again, if you already have a playset, or if you just want to have Prosperity regardless, you know, then it should be fine. So yes, Yubel is another one I wanted to talk about. And as for the next deck, this one is really cool. Like, a lot of them on this list actually are kind of interesting and cool and a little different. So this next one is going to be Rulik Gori, and it's really cheap. I think it's the cheapest deck. Well, I mean, almost. It's around $50 for the entire deck, and I literally counted Sorry, I hit the pop filter. I literally counted the entire deck. If you check out the deck list, the only 2 cards that aren't in my calculation, which is fairly obvious, is SP and Sky Crisis. Like, if you want to play Sky Crisis, this is fine, but it's kind of falling off a little bit. But if Branded still sees a lot of play, then it's going to be really useful against that deck. And obviously, if you want to invest into SP, that's a whole another story. Like, I'm not going to get into that. If you want SP, obviously you can play SP, and if you have it or pulled it or whatever. Or if you want my giveaway, which is still going, for an SP Little Knight, you know, make sure you can, you know, if you still haven't, make sure you enter into the giveaway. So yes, what makes this deck really cool is the Goaty cards, obviously. They're a bit of a surprise factor, just like Yubel, and you can achieve and like amass a ton of resources and advantage fairly quickly, actually. Like, if your Lifeless Leaf Fish goes through and then you start like doing stuff with like Hop Ear and Synchro Summoning during your opponent's turn, a lot of your cards like return to your field, or, you know, get special summon on the following turn, and just bring you a lot of value. You get to summon a monster which banishes your opponent's, I don't think it's monster, I think it's a card actually, so you get to banish your opponent's card. You can make Baron, you can make Chenging if you want, and yeah, you know, Cupid Bitch is a really important part of this deck also. So on top of that, you're playing runic cards and hand traps. That's what I really like about this deck, is the fact that you play all of these runic spells, but you don't need to play a gigantic Goaty engine, so you actually have space to play. Over here we see 3 Nibiru, 3 Ash, a Called By, and a Talent. So essentially you have about, you know, 8 to 10 spots for non-engine, which is really important in runic decks. And yeah, if you pair like Goaty with non-engine, so hand traps, and also runic, I think you should be fine, because we already know if a runic deck starts snowballing, like it's gonna be kind of out of control. You're not gonna be able to contend with, you know, all the destruction effects and negation effects. And you know, I was literally outdecked by runic Goaty because I just kept grinding with them. I would not quit and admit defeat. I was trying to make it work, but they outdecked me. And yeah, it was kind of tough to go, you know, in that one game. It was kind of tough to go up against that deck. And a lot of times I've seen people saying, you know, I was caught off guard by this deck. So I think it's cool. And as for the last deck, I also wanted to mention Virtual World Punk. We have so many interesting decks on this list today. So let me pull up that deck list. Actually, from what I've seen, what the point of this deck is King Calamity. Or if you don't go for King Calamity, you can make all of these different synchros, and it's like, you know, it's fairly self-explanatory. You just play your Virtual World cards, your Punk cards, and you synchro summon into pretty much anything you feel like doing in that particular situation. That's what I really like, is the fact that you end on a board that's beneficial to you in that matchup. Like, if Shen is not amazing against every single deck, you know, you can just not make it, but it's probably going to be really good. Like, Shen is nice. It's a really strong card, kind of tough to deal with. Or you can just go for Crystal Wing or just Baron, you know, like I said. So yeah, you can make Herald of Arclight. It's just, there's a lot of possibility out there. And I really like this about this deck, on top of the fact that it's really accessible to pick up. Like, a Virtual World core, if we just think about Virtual World cards and the amounts that are pictured in this, you know, deck list over here, you're spending like a couple euros maybe for a Virtual World core. It's extremely cheap. So if you have anything from before, you just add a couple cards to it and you have a full functioning deck. And I also like the Sai Impulse, I think it's called, like the 2-off spell, which basically just has this random effect where it like makes your opponent get rid of their hand and then draw 3 cards or something. So you like hand loop them. I don't know. I think it's really funny, and I think that this deck is interesting. You don't play that much non-engine though. That's a tiny issue with it. You have like 6 spots, which is not ideal, but in theory, if your engine does enough, you should be fine. Oh, you have 8 spots. Okay, I mean, you know, you could use a little more, but this is not like one of the top meta contenders. If anything from this list, if I would have to choose anything, I would probably go for Flunder, I think, if you want to counter the meta. But yeah, you know, everything seems viable. Of course, it's topping, you know, that's why you see all the deck lists in this video. And overall, I just feel like that, not just feel like, I know that you can play you know, on a budget, and you can be successful in this format. And all of these decks are just proof of that, honestly. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I always love talking about anything budget friendly to get more people into the game. And, you know, like the video if you did like it and enjoy it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and let me know which decks would also have to make this list, because like I said before, there's quite a lot of them out there that are viable and cheap. So yeah, you know, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.